Hello and welcome to Murphy's Garden, and this video is all about planting a bare root hedge. Bare root season runs from November through to March, so we're getting to the middle of March and so we're coming to the end of bare root season. So if you are thinking about planting a hedge, now is the time to do it. The advantage of planting bare root is that it's much cheaper than if you were to grow pot growing hedges. So if you are thinking of doing it, then this is a video to watch. So we've got lots of hedges in this garden. We've got evergreen and we've got deciduous hedges. And I think a garden which just has fences perhaps can sometimes feel a little bit sterile. Hedges bring life to the garden. They attract lots and lots of birds and wildlife. And since introducing hedges to this garden, the garden is just, there's always this lovely background noise of bird song. There's loads of birds, whizzing in and out of the hedges and nesting in the hedges, and it's just a joy. It really has brought the garden to life. So I strongly recommend planting a hedge if you're thinking of it. Now you can plant a hedge at any time of year, and pot growing hedging plants are available all year round. But the advantage of planting bare root is really, the biggest advantage is the cost, and also it's much less labour intensive than if you were to plant pot growing or even root ball. And root ball, the difference between root ball and bare root is that the plants are root ball, they come with a mound of earth around them, the roots are in the soil. So they're heavier to transport, they're more work to plant because you've got to dig a hole for the root ball. We did do a video on planting root ball yew hedge, so if you want to watch that, that's one to also look at. But this is all about planting bare root. Now bare root means just that. It means when the plant comes, it's devoid of any soil, it's just in its bare root form. And that means it's cheaper, and the reason it's cheaper is because the growers and the nurseries don't have the expense of the labour of potting them up, putting them in pots, the cost of the compost, and also the cost of the pots. But more importantly, the cost of transportation is much higher when they've got the weighty soil with them. So bare root is dug up directly from the field. If you turn up at a nursery and say, I would like 100 bare root plants, it doesn't work like that. You have to pre-order, so tell them in advance with a phone call what it is you want, and then if you can, go and collect them. And when you're doing that, try and make sure you've got the ground ready. If you haven't got the ground ready, you can just heel them in, perhaps into a vegetable patch or just some spare ground while you prepare the ground. But ideally, if you can, have the ground all ready to go so they don't dry out. They have got a reputation sometimes for have got a higher failure rate than other types of hedging when grown pot grown or root balled, but this is only really because of poor preparation, and they've got no soil with them, and so they're very vulnerable and very likely to dry out. We did plant one of our beech hedges. We prepared the ground and we ordered some online, and they came through the post, and it hit it was an early Easter, and it hit the Easter week, and they got stuck in the post, and freakishly we had this very hot weekend, and when the plants arrived, it was too late. The plants we did plant them, but none of them took. So that's the reason. So it's far better if you can go and pick the plants up from a local nursery, and really when you do it that way. I haven't really had any failures, or maybe 10% failure rate at the most. So that's definitely the way to do it. So there are lots of plants that you can plant bare root. We've done a rose video on how to plant bare root roses, but this is about hedging. So we're going to focus today on beech hedging, which is Fagus sylvatica, and that can be the green beech, Fagus sylvatica, or Fagus sylvatica purpurea, which is the purple beech. And we'll also look at Carpinus speculus, which is hornbeam. You can also plant a native hedge, which is lovely and great for attracting wildlife, and that often includes a bit of a mix of hawthorn and blackthorn and wild rose, and that's beautiful too, and that definitely suits perhaps more of a wild, a wildlife area and more naturalistic style of planting. So recently Alistair has just planted a Carpinus speculus, a hornbeam hedge. So the reason for choosing a beech or hornbeam, there's several reasons for why you might choose one over the other. They both look quite similar. The green beech and the green leaves of the hornbeam are pretty similar. Some people think beech is slightly prettier than hornbeam. Beech does hold on to more of its leaves perhaps than hornbeam, but hornbeam does hold on to some. So behind me this is a beech hedge. And you'll notice that it's got most of its leaves on it, so it gives really good screening even in the winter months. And the reason for this is when plants or trees grow over about 2 meters, they lose their leaves, but shorter plants at this height, to stop predation from eating from deers and things eating their leaves, they hold on to the old leaves because it becomes unpalatable to deers. So that's the reason for them holding on to their leaves, and that just protects the new shoots coming through. So you do get this good coverage, and I like it in the winter months. I think it looks nice, the colour, especially against the green evergreen Leylandii hedge in the background. Beech is well suited to a really sunny site. If your site is sunny, if it's got good free draining soil, plant beech because that will establish nice and quickly. Hornbeam, if you've got an exposed site, a cold site, a windy site, or even slightly soil that's slightly prone to not flooding as such, because you wouldn't really like that, but certainly the soil that doesn't necessarily drain brilliantly all the time, then go for hornbeam over beech. Beech much prefers more free draining soil, and this part of the garden gets full sun all the time, and if you've got full sun, beech tends to establish quicker over a hornbeam in that instance. But definitely if you've got the pleached hedge that we've got is hornbeam because it's very prone to the wind in that part of the garden, so that's the reason for choosing one over the other. The other thing to consider is how you're going to plant your hedge. So depending on the look you want, you can plant it in a double row. So that's where you do a zigzag effect of plants. And the reason for that is you'll get a nice thick hedge. It can help, if you've got animals, as it gets more mature and the branches get quite dense, it potentially can stop any dogs or animals getting out. So here you can see I planted this beech, and I've done this one in a single row. So they're just spaced 1, 2, 3. Planting in a single row, I've done about 3 per metre. But if you want a thicker hedge, a more impenetrable hedge, and that might be good if you've got animals that you're putting it on a border and you don't want the dog to get out. If you plant it quite tight and quite close together, it will eventually thicken up, and I don't think the dog could get through. But I'll go and show you the other hedge that I planted where we've done it in a double row. So this is the hedge that I've planted in a double row, and it's getting really nice and thick. It's a good sort of getting towards like a metre in width now. The advantage of planting in a double row, if you do get a couple of failures, it doesn't really matter because the hedge will soon fill in and you won't really notice that. Whereas if you're planting, one next to the other, then if one of them dies, it will be quite noticeable. Now the other advantage of planting a bare root hedge is that it's really easy to plant. It really is easy. When I've looked online at some advice about planting bare root, some people opt to dig a trench and put the bare root plants into a trench. I think that's an awful lot of work and it's really not necessary. I've planted all these beech hedges in our garden, and I've done it this method that I'm going to show you, and they've all done really well and have taken really well, and it's really not hard. So for the purpose of demonstration, I'm not planting a hedge in this part of the garden, but I have got a bare root beech hedge here, and you can see its little roots there, and it's only small. But what I'm going to just show you, just a close-up view of what to do, because this is my tried and tested technique. I might patent this manoeuvre. This is going to be called the Murphy Manoeuvre, and I use this technique for all sorts of planting. I did it for my bulbs. I find this really works well, so I'll just show you what I do. So I'll just turn the camera around. Right, I hope you can see that. So what I'm going to do, and this works particularly well on sandy soil. Al, when he was doing this hornbeam hedge, he said it wasn't so easy to do on clay because it was very compacted. So what you do is put your spade in. It's nice that you can use just a little spade. This is called a rabbiting spade. I don't really know why it's called a rabbiting spade, but anyway, that's what it's called. And what I do is I put it in quite deep, and I rock the soil back and forward. And what you're trying to do is make quite a deep cavity low down. And then all you do, and you must plant the hedge up to where it was planted in. It will come with a mark on it. You'll see where it was in the soil. Here you can just see it was planted up to there. So you want to continue that depth. And all you literally do is just wiggle it into the hole and push the soil back. At this point, the other thing you can do, if you want your hedge to get off to a flying start, you can use mycorrhizal fungi, where you just sprinkle the roots with the mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi are beneficial fungi growing in association with the plant roots and exist by taking sugars from plants in exchange for moisture and nutrients gathered from the soil by fungal strands. The mycorrhizal greatly increase the absorption area of a plant and acting as extensions to the root system, making new plants establish quicker, resist soil-borne diseases and drought, and therefore it's a really good idea to use when planting a bare root hedge. If you haven't got mycorrhizal fungi and you want to just get on with the job, and you've got bone meal, then use bone meal. But I did read somewhere that you shouldn't use the two together. Bone meal will counteract the effects of the mycorrhizal fungi, so use one or the other. You can use a little bit of grow more as well in the site as well. So you want these roots to have been nice and moist. So if they're not, that you want to put them in a bucket of water before planting, while you're waiting to plant them, so that the roots are moist. The soil is lovely and wet because we've had all this rain, and then all you simply do is slot it into the hole like that, and then cover it over like that, and then just gently, you don't have to be rough, but just gently press the soil in around it, and that's it. So we're going to go and join Alistair. He's on a location where he's planting a Carpinus betulus or hornbeam hedge. So the first thing to do is to clear the site of any competing vegetation. Next, you can dig over or till the soil if it's very compacted. If it's not heavy soil, this probably isn't necessary. Next, get your bare root hedging plants. If it's a hot day, then put them in a bucket of water while you work. And next, work out your spacing. So when planting in a double row, we usually allow 5 per metre. If planting in a single row, then allow 3 per metre. And here you can see Al is employing the tried and tested Murphy Manoeuvre, where he puts in the spade. I mean, some people just do it, you just put the spade in and make a slit, but I think that manoeuvre of just moving it back and forward, it just loosens the soil and allows the little roots, the little fine roots, to find a way through, particularly relevant if this is a compacted soil. So he's now just putting in the plant, covering it over. He has added a bit of fish, blood and bone. Unfortunately, the client didn't have mycorrhizal fungi, but he had got some blood, fish and bone, so that will help add a bit of nutrition to the plant as it establishes. So that's the last hedge plant planted. You can barely see the hedge because it's only tiny, but it is in there, and look, it's all planted very, very nicely. And once the leaves come in the spring, it will be a bit more visible and it will grow up. And because it's on the main road, we'll be able to watch it grow as we drive past. The other thing which you could just do at this point is just to add some bark chippings over the soil, and that would be really good because it would suppress the weeds and hold in the moisture. So good job. In the UK, we've just had a deluge of rain, so the soil is nice and wet. So if you are planting, this is a good time to do it. Last month in February, ironically, it was actually really quite dry, so probably wouldn't have been so good to do then. I prefer, if possible, to plant a bare root hedge in November, because that way you know the roots are going to be in a moist soil throughout the winter. If you plant late on in March, as it is now, and we get a hot summer, then be aware that you will have to keep that hedge watered over the summer. So it's a little bit more work planting it in March, in that you just have to monitor it and stop it, make sure it doesn't dry out. So I hope that's inspired you to plant your own hedge, and you won't regret it. Well, you might regret it when it comes to having to cut it all, but other than that, for the rest of the year, you'll really enjoy it, and it will bring lots of birds and birdsong to your garden. So thank you very much for watching from Murphy and I, and join us again in the next video. Bye for now. He's waving. You're waving.